On a Tuesday morning in Caracas, helicopters land, a president disappears into U.S. custody, and somewhere on a spreadsheet, $17 trillion worth of oil quietly moves columns. You don't get a news alert for that part, but your mortgage rate, your job, and your investments feel it for years. This is The Comment Section with Thomas Paul, and today we're talking about how a U.S. raid in Venezuela could line up one of the biggest wealth transfers of our lifetime, and what it actually means for your money. Let's start with the core story in plain English. Venezuela sits on some of the largest proven oil reserves on Earth. On paper, it's insanely rich. In reality, the country has been crushed by hyperinflation, sanctions, corruption, and total economic chaos. So when U.S. forces land, detain a leader, and help flip the political setup, it's not just about democracy or stability. It's about who controls those reserves, who gets the contracts, and who gets paid for the next 30 to 50 years. Here's the uncomfortable part. That kind of move doesn't just reshuffle power in Caracas, it reshuffles wealth globally. Capital flows out of some countries into others, out of some companies into others. And regular people like you and me usually find out after the big players are already positioned. So the real question is, are we watching a local drama or the opening scene of a massive global money shift? Hold that thought, because once we zoom out from Venezuela, the pattern gets very familiar. Over the last 2,000 years, big empires tend to follow a script. They grow, they dominate trade, they control resources, they print money, and then they start bending the rules to keep the party going. They weaponize finance. They weaponize shipping lanes. And sometimes, like we're seeing here, they weaponize stability operations in resource-rich countries. When I was 12, my parents lost most of their savings because they trusted a bank advisor who said, "This is safe, it always works like this. No drama, no explosions, just bad incentives and quiet paperwork." The dinner table got a lot more silent after that. That's why when I see a military raid tied to trillions in resources, I don't hear the speeches. I follow the incentives. So, key takeaway number one, this is not a random event. It's part of a bigger story about how the U.S. tries to maintain its financial power as debt grows, rivals rise, and the old system creaks. Pause for a second and ask yourself this. If a single political flip in one country can redirect that much oil, who's actually in control of free markets? Now let's break down the main financial plays hiding behind the headlines. First, control of supply. Whoever influences Venezuelan oil policy suddenly has a big lever over global energy prices. In a world still heavily dependent on fossil fuels, that's power. Not just military power, pricing power, negotiation power, sanctions power. Second, contracts. You don't just grab barrels, you structure deals. Long-term extraction contracts, infrastructure projects, trading arrangements. That's where trillions move over decades, through legal documents and payment terms, not just armies. Third, currency. If Venezuelan oil gets locked into dollar-based deals, that supports the U.S. dollar's role as the main global currency. Every time oil trades in dollars instead of another currency, it keeps demand for dollars alive. That makes it easier for the U.S. to borrow, spend, and run deficits. Here's the part most people miss. This isn't just America versus Venezuela. It's also America versus every rival who wants energy priced in something else, like another big power trying to push its own currency, or a bloc trying to move away from the dollar. So when you see a raid, think less about the speeches and more about this question. Whose currency gets reinforced and whose gets sidelined? Now, what does any of that have to do with you if you're just trying to invest, pay off debt, and not get wrecked? Here's where it gets interesting. Big geopolitical moves like this tend to show up in three places: energy prices, inflation, and capital flows. If oil supply becomes more controlled by one power block, they can try to stabilize prices or squeeze them. Either way, your gas, your groceries, and your power bill feel it. Energy is in everything. That, in turn, feeds into inflation. Higher energy costs usually push up the price of almost everything else. Central banks then have to decide, do they raise rates and slow the economy, or accept more inflation and quietly eat away at your savings? Meanwhile, big investors, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, hedge funds, rotate money. If they think the U.S. has tightened its grip on a key resource, they might double down on dollar assets. If they think it backfires and creates more global tension, they might diversify faster into other regions, commodities, or even alternative stores of value. Either way, someone is front-running these moves, and it's not the guy finding out from a push notification on his phone. Quick reality check here. There is no magic play that wins every time something like this happens. Anyone promising that is selling you something. When I was in college working at a local newspaper, I watched the same economic story get spun into 3 totally different headlines just to test which one sold more papers. Same facts, different framing. That's when it really clicked. News is not pure information. News is marketing. So what do you actually watch if you want signal instead of spin? 3 things. 1. Energy price trends, not just daily noise. Is oil entering a new long-term band? Are we stuck in a higher floor? That matters for everything from airlines to food companies to your index fund. 2. Policy changes. Are sanctions relaxed or tightened? Are new trade deals announced? Are certain companies suddenly getting lots of favorable contracts in the region? Those are clues to who's being positioned as the main winner. 3. Currency moves. Is there rising talk of settling energy in non-dollar currencies? If yes, that's a slow-burning fuse on the current dollar system. Not end of the world tomorrow, but a shift you want to be ahead of, not surprised by. In my early 30s, I put a chunk of money into something boring and unfashionable while everyone chased whatever shiny hype was trending. It didn't impress anybody. It just worked. Slowly. Years later, that boring move looked smart, not because I'm a genius, but because fundamentals eventually beat headlines. Same idea here. You don't need to guess every headline. You need to understand the direction of the system. By the way, if you're sitting there thinking, I'd love to cover this stuff on YouTube, but I don't want to be on camera, and I don't have time to research all this, that's literally how this channel runs. This video was created with Fludge.io, the same system that powers this entire channel. It researches topics, builds a structured script, generates the avatar, even uploads to YouTube. You stay in control, review, tweak, or jump in at any step. No camera, no editing marathons, just consistent videos in any niche you care about, from finance and news to history or hobbies. If that sounds like your kind of unfair advantage, check out Fludge.io after this. Now let's land this plane. What does the U.S. raid in Venezuela mean for you? It means the game of global money is getting more aggressive, more open, and more tied to real-world resources again. It means big powers are not shy about using every tool, military, financial, legal, to keep control over what still runs the world, energy. It means wealth will keep moving from people who react emotionally to headlines to people who pay attention to incentives, watch the flows, and position themselves calmly. So here's my practical, non-clickbait takeaway. Number 1, don't ignore geopolitics anymore. You don't need to become a war analyst, but at least link this event to these markets in your own notes. Make that connection. Number 2, diversify intelligently. That might mean some exposure to energy, to different regions, maybe to assets that don't depend on everything staying calm and predictable forever. Number 3, be skeptical of anyone selling easy money off chaos. Every time I've seen once-in-a-lifetime plays blasted across social media, someone else was already in and ready to dump. And a quick disclaimer, nothing in this video is personal financial advice. I'm not your advisor, I don't know your situation, and you should always do your own research or talk to a qualified professional before making big money decisions. I'll leave you with this. When I got laid off in a so-called strategic realignment, the memo sounded very smart. The result was still a bunch of regular people packing boxes. That's how I look at geopolitical moves now. Smart words, big speeches, and real costs for normal people. So, your turn. Do you think moves like the Venezuela raid strengthen the current system, or speed up the search for something to replace it? Drop your take in the comments. I read them, and they shape what we cover next. If you found this useful, hit like so more people actually see it, and subscribe to The Comment Section with Thomas Paul for more calm, sarcastic breakdowns of the money stories hiding behind the headlines. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.